Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedictus tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Instead of preaching at Mass, I'm going to give another one of these little almost fireside chats without the fire, but in quiet dress. And on this Sunday next before Advent, which coincides with the feast of Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of musicians. The collect of today's Mass in English is, "Stir up, we beseech thee, O Lord, the wills of thy faithful people, that they more plenteously, bringing forth the fruit of good works, may of thy loving kindness be more plenteously rewarded. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the unity of the Holy Ghost, one God, world without end." These words, stir up, they are quite powerful in our thoughts and in our imaginations. They are words that we will hear again and again during the coming Advent. And indeed in the Ambrosian Rite and in various other ancient rites of the Church, this Sunday and last Sunday, which was the 23rd after Trinity, they were the first Sundays of Advent, because Advent lasted for 6 weeks, not merely for 4, as in the present scheme. So this Sunday next before Advent, which is still one of the Sundays after Trinity, the last one, already has this theme of Advent with this prayer which begins, "Stir up." And, we ask the Lord to stir up the wills of his faithful people. We ask grace from God to stir up, to wake us up. Wachest auf, ruft uns die Stimme. Wake up, as is said by the great German chorale, so beautifully set to music by Johann Sebastian Bach. Wake up, wachest auf. Wake up from what? Wake up from our lethargy, from our habits, from our usual lives, where we just go through going to work, eating, sleeping, watching films, and also in this present lockdown, we are pushed even more into that somnolence, because we have to face, or some of us have to face, a great degree of emptiness, of boredom perhaps. I don't easily get bored. There's always something to do. There's always a book to read. There's always something to write. I very often have work to do to earn a living. There are always things to do, but sometimes we lose the will. We just become flaccid, without any strength, without any stiffness, without any resolve. We just become limp, and we just allow ourselves to be drawn on whilst the clock is ticking, while time is going on, but we lose all sense of time. This is very often what happens to people in this lockdown. And I'm hearing on the news that people in the government, Monsieur Véran, who is Minister of Health, is very, very concerned that a lot of people are suffering from psychological problems because of the lockdown. Well, I can imagine that there are people who are suffering from depression, from many other problems associated with anxiety. So we need to wake up, we need to give ourselves a pinch, and we need to, in a certain way, take back control of our lives. Although there are a lot of conspiracy theories, their usual slogan is wake up and smell the coffee. Well, yes, what they say is true in that way. But also, wake up for what purpose? The first thing to wake up to is to become conscious, to become aware of what is around us. We can't necessarily do anything about it, but we need to be aware. And as we are now in what we call the eschatological theme of the church's year, as we look forward to Advent. And Advent means the coming of Christ. There are three comings of Christ in the fathers of the church. The way Christ came through his incarnation and was born of the Virgin Mary into the family of Saint Joseph and lived as a human being until his passion and death at something like the age of 33. He was with us in his incarnation, or at least he was with us. He was with those people who were alive at the time. Now he comes to us in the liturgy. The liturgy represents or represents the entire mystery of Christ, not only the Passion, not only the atonement or the redemption, but everything about him, from the incarnation to the second coming, through the ascension, through all these mysteries, or just one complete mystery that is only separated into parts to help with catechesis, with our understanding of things, our very imperfect understanding of this mystery. And then finally, an event that will happen sometime in the future, through what agency we have no idea. That might be through some catastrophe, through a meteorite or a comet, or simply the Lord coming back to earth and everything being transformed in an instant and brought into another life, as we each are at our death. And the same thing would happen with the whole world. So we need to be aware of what is threatening us in our days. In the 1930s, it was a very, very different world, where there were the dictators who were already on the scene. There was Hitler, there was Mussolini, there was Franco, various others who wanted to take over the world. And behind them were some very sinister and very powerful men of finance. Those dictators would never have got anywhere without the money that was given them behind the scenes. I know this is starting to sound a little bit tinfoil, that the same forces or similar forces, or perhaps even worse, are with us today in the form of very big business like Google and Amazon and Facebook, very, very big technological companies who are not very transparent about what they're doing and what they want to do in terms of the world of humanity. Perhaps they just want to make a fantastic amount of money. Many of us may suspect that they want to do more than that. It's very, very difficult to tell. So they talk about a reset, and the great opportunity that is presented to them is this present pandemic of the coronavirus. And you will find a lot of the tinfoil people saying that there's just nothing. It's just a hoax. Well, governments and politicians aren't so well organised as that. They're usually very incompetent. Something would slip. We claim to know about these things, and the so-called conspirators think they're keeping everything secret, so that they can spring it on us, so that they can spring their dystopia. So I refuse that way of thinking. I refuse that simplistic way of thinking. But there is something. My present inquiry is to read various articles and listen to presentations from different points of view. And my main question is, what are the moral principles of people like Bill Gates and Soros and Georg Schwab and various, and including Prince Charles, who apparently is supporting this great reset. I hope that these men have some noble idea of humanity and of solving the true problems of the environment and the economic system. So the important thing is, let's not get hysterical about things, but let's wake up, read, learn, and try to find out what's going on. Let's try to see these things rationally and to try to understand something. Because we are being pushed and pulled around the place by a lot of propaganda, which just seems to be contradictory. This is an insult to our intelligence. So we've got to think about these things. We've got to find out what we can. We've got to read. So that takes an effort. So that's one way that we can wake up and start becoming aware. We also have to be aware of our own humanity, of our own freedom and our sense of purpose. And sometimes we might have to make changes in our lives in order to find that way that is being obscured or annulled, cancelled, destroyed, maybe by another person or a system that we believe in that has no reasonable basis. So, returning more specifically to our Christian faith, we should not simply reduce everything to a religion. That's to say, well, religion means religio, to retie, to reaffirm the relationship between man and God. But it also means the system of what we do, the things I'm wearing. The choir dress, I wouldn't go into town dressed like this. This represents my office and ministry as a priest. So there are the acts of religion, of man's relationship with God through the liturgy and through the community of the church. And we do have to have will to wake up and to be fully ourselves. But it's not only will, it's also faith, it's also God's grace. Especially it is love that will bring us to have that will to go forward. I wrote recently in my blog about the role of and the place of morality, and I mentioned one very significant thing, that everything begins with love. Morality is a consequence of faith, of devotion, of love. It's not a precondition. If we love, we can do as we want, as St. Augustine said. That's to say that if we really love, sin won't be a part of the picture. If we truly loved, we would never sin. It's because we are lacking in love to some degree or another that sin comes into the world and comes into us. And we sin through weakness or through malice. And I will continue here on Saint Cecilia as the patron saint of musicians. I came to become a Christian, to become somebody of the church through music, through once going to a church and hearing the organ being played at a Christmas carol service. I can remember the time very precisely in St George's Parish Church in Kendal, next to Strumgate Bridge, spanning the River Kent, in the market town of Kendal, in Westmoreland. Now the county is called Cumbria, where I was born and where I was brought up. And it's a funny, well, it's not a little church, it's quite a big church built in the early 19th century, very much a preaching barn type of church, with a chancel built on in the Edwardian times, looking much more Catholic, much more medieval English. And I'd always been very impressed with this church and its big 3-manual Wilkinson organ. And sometimes our family, we would go to church at Christmas and we would sing the traditional English Christmas carols. And this organ would thunder away. I could feel the vibration through the floor, a wooden floor, coming from the bass pipes of the organ. And for a 7-year-old boy, it's quite an experience. And I was interested in the idea of learning to play the organ, but my mother suggested that it would be better to play the piano first, which is usually the recommendation, because a little boy of 7 years old is hardly likely to be able to reach the pedals. So the first thing is to be able to play on the keyboard. And so I did that. I started the piano at 8, and I finally started the organ at 13 when I went to St. Peter's in York. And it was there that I discovered the choir and English choral music. And we would sing evensong each Sunday, which was a really wonderful thing to discover Anglican chant for the Psalms and the Magnificat in Nunc Dimittis, which we'd either sing to a psalm chant or to a setting by somebody like Stanford or Charles Wood or the many other English musicians who have set these texts to music. And then we would have the versicles and the responses, and we would have an anthem after the third collect, after the little litany and the three collects, and we would have an anthem before the intercessionary prayers read by the chaplain. And this is something I would discover in York Minster, in the various parish churches of York, and this office being sung or said in just about every place. And it's a wonderful thing. And the music, I can't remember which of the fathers of the church, I think it was St. Augustine, said something like, "To sing is to pray twice." This is very important. The tradition of church music. But I was brought up in the Anglican tradition of church music, and I also came across the musical tradition in the Roman Catholic Church, which has largely disappeared, except in a few cathedrals and major churches in Europe, especially in the Germanic countries. A few choirs have survived in England, but mostly the musical tradition is gone. Apart from concerts, that is no longer a part of the liturgy. And one particular composer I came across in the Roman Catholic Church, I never met him of course, because he died in the 1950s, but Don Lorenzo Peruzzi, he was a priest, an Italian priest, and a very, very able composer, and it was one of the it was Puccini himself said, if I had half the music in my head of Peruzzi, più di musica nella sua testa che, I can't remember the complete quote, but it amounted to saying that Puccini, a great operatic composer, had such esteem for the music of Peruzzi, a very, very great great man, and he became a maestro of the Cappella at the Vatican, and wrote some beautiful masses and some beautiful pieces of music, and for the Sistine Chapel and for St. Peter's Basilica. And so this was the musical tradition of Italy. Sometimes Italian choirs can be a little less disciplined in terms of intonation and singing flat than the English choirs, the English cathedral choirs that are so much more disciplined. But I mentioned Peruzzi because he established in the Roman Catholic Church in the 20th century what was called the Cecilian movement after Saint Cecilia, and he set a new standard of restraining music a little bit, so as to be more of a servant of the liturgy, unlike the more flamboyant music of Vienna, especially Mozart and Haydn, and Verdi in Italy with his heavy symphonic style, the whole Requiem mass that sounds like an opera, a great piece of music, but a little difficult to imagine in the context of the liturgy. The Council of Trent came within an inch of getting rid of all music other than Gregorian chant. I'm very fond of Gregorian chant. I directed the music at seminary at Griciliano when I was a seminarian. I just happened to be the one who was an organist and with enough knowledge of music, including Gregorian chant, to assume the role. So I did what I could. Didn't always agree with my superiors about the interpretation of Gregorian chant. The French way tends to be a little bit insipid. I tended to go for the more Anglo-Saxon, Germanic and Italian way of singing Gregorian chant rather than the French way. Well, there are differences of interpretation, but to reduce the whole musical life of the church to Gregorian chant would be just too austere. Fine in a monastery, in an abbey. I spent 6 months at the Abbey of Trior, where there were two types of music. Everything that was sung was Gregorian chant, but I could, when I happened to play for Mass or for Vespers, I could play pieces during the silent times of the liturgy, like at the communion or the offertory, or the final voluntary. So I installed an organ at Trior in 1997, but it was very much Gregorian chant and Gregorian chant only. But it's a monastery. There are monasteries where polyphonic chant is sung, but not in the French congregation. So where will we still find the fullness of church music? Unfortunately, it seems to be in decline. The coronavirus knocked it for six. Nowadays, when churches can be open and there can be singing, you won't find the choir all together in the choir stalls. They have to observe the regulatory distances, and even more because they're singing, and if somebody has the virus, it's very often the way that the virus is transmitted is through singing, because it sends the virus in the man's breath much further away. So in England, in the cathedrals, great efforts have been made to reorganise things to allow church music. At the moment, England, like France, is in lockdown, and so we're all back to square one like in March. But hopefully in December, things will be loosened, churches will reopen, and it will be possible to sing again. But of course, in order to sing, you need to have a choir. It's just the one thing I don't have here. I can sing alone. I usually sing something after Mass, something like the Salve Regina or some other piece. But I'm on my own, and I can hardly sing polyphonic music with only one voice. It's physically impossible. And unfortunately, also in many of our churches, in the Anglican Catholic Church, well, it's congregational hymns in all the places in England where there is a congregation. In my bishop's church in Kent, it'll be congregational hymns, but fortunately they found a new organist, which is something really great, and that will give the liturgy that much more power and beauty. So I need to perhaps situate music in a greater context, that of beauty in the liturgy. Beauty is one of the transcendentals of Plato, along with goodness and truth and many other things. And beauty is particularly important. It's probably the greatest apologia of Christianity, of Christian humanism, which is what we all aspire to. And this is certainly one lens through which we will look at this idea of waking up to ourselves, waking up to a truth outside ourselves, waking up to what threatens us, but also what encourages and confirms us and moves us to something more noble and higher than our humdrum lives. It's very important to appreciate beauty in all its forms, in music, in poetry, in literature and in art. I've tried to do something good in this chapel. I'm not very talented in things with art and design, but I've tried to do something that is harmonious and something that is coherent and good. So music is just one aspect of this beauty, which is almost an icon of God's love. I'm very impressed by the teaching about the icon in Eastern Christianity. This an icon is not merely an image, but it brings a real presence of the saint or who is portrayed, or the Lord Jesus in the icons of the Christ Pantocrator, in His Majesty. They're usually very impressive icons, often painted directly in the apse of the church. And an icon brings Christ into, or brings us into Christ's presence. An icon is a kind of vehicle, like the sacraments, of the church. It's almost the scholastic tradition would call this a sacramental, something that has the same effect as a sacrament without being formally a sacrament. And I go much further, that beauty is an icon of love. Love is an icon of God Himself. So this is the role of music. There's not an awful lot I can do. I've composed a few very, very short works, and I've sung them with a little quartet, but it wasn't a church quartet. And there were various difficulties, and unfortunately all that's gone now. All that's gone. But so what we can do is to play our instruments, is to listen to music, do what we can, keep the flag flying, do what we can, even though the odds seem to be stacked up against us. And the more we can live according to these principles, according to these transcendentals of truth, beauty and goodness, the more chance we have of remaining human, of remaining ourselves in spite of whatever might happen in the future. We dread the notion of a Huxley-style Brave New World, or even the 1984 of Orwell. And I can understand how people can become very anxious when they see these things becoming more and more a reality, where they see cameras in shops and in the streets, and various incredibly advanced kinds of technology that apparently can recognise faces and watch us and spy on us and eventually control us. I don't know whether these things will happen. Maybe something unexpected will happen to stop this. Hitler was stopped, and he wanted to rule the world, and he wanted to destroy a whole people by sending Jews to the concentration camps and to their deaths. And he succeeded to a large extent. But yet, the free world did stop him, against all the odds of some of the best fighting forces in the world. The German army was second to none. But yet, the tyranny was stopped, as was Mussolini in Italy. Franco, well, he met what was coming to him. He died. Everything has to come to an end, sooner or later. Although he wasn't he wasn't the worst. And there are many madmen and many evil men who threaten our world. We have to be aware of them, to be aware of ourselves, to be aware of them. It's 3/4 of the way to stopping them. We can stop them also with our prayers, with our thoughts. And if enough of us in this world put something positive in the way of prayer into what is happening in this world, then we can stop the evil and transform it into good. At least this is what I hope for in this time of hope, in this time of Advent. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.